Yeah, sure. And Europe clearly has its challenges at the moment, both in the short term and we believe in the long term as well. Monetary policy has done a lot of the work there so far in helping the broader economy. But what we're failing to see is fiscal reform coming through in a lot of the countries there. I think the countries where we have seen some efforts towards fiscal reform, like Spain, like the countries that went into EU, IMF programs, have benefited from that. But countries like Italy and France have struggled, and we see them struggling in the future as well, until we see some reforms coming through from governments, from the politicians. And this could go for some years yet, until we see some of these governments in countries where perhaps they have larger tax burdens, larger social costs, reforming and encouraging further investment in the economy and growth for the future.
Mm-hmm. And so in terms, coming down to the infrastructure level, to what extent and what information are you getting from infrastructure assets in terms of a gauge or a reading on just general activity within the economy?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different metrics that we look at there. Demand obviously is a very important one in terms of the usage of the infrastructure. Not all infrastructure is, or the returns from infrastructure is driven by the demand or the usage, but it is an important indicator. The efficiency of an asset is also important, operational efficiency and financial efficiency. And also the returns, obviously, that our assets are generating, the returns from the investment that our companies are undertaking, and that's the important part to the infrastructure investment thesis. It's the amount of investment that is required going forward, and even in Europe, where there's often perception that the infrastructure there is reasonably well developed. It is, but a lot of that development took place 30, 40 years ago, post the Second World War, in a lot of cases, and needs a lot of refurbishment. And there's a lot of new technology as well, which is driving further investment in infrastructure. And these are trends that we're monitoring very closely for our companies, and looking to take advantage of those trends where we see the more attractive opportunities.
And in terms of the impact that the slow growth environment and potentially deflationary environment has, how resilient do the infrastructure assets hold up? Or how resilient, I should say, are the returns on those infrastructure assets?
We've seen returns hold up reasonably well to date. That's certainly been the case, and that's been driven by a lot of the investment that I mentioned. The investment's not going to go away, so that's going to continue to be required. Not all regulatory frameworks or contracts have inflation embedded in them. So where there is deflation in some countries in Europe, we can take advantage of investing in those countries that are in fact protected from deflation. And there's examples of that in Spain, where we have some investments. And equally be able to take advantage of countries where there perhaps is more attractive economic environments. And the UK still has relatively high inflation compared to the continent, so we have investments there that are benefiting from that in the water sector. So there are some challenges economically for Europe broadly, but within Europe there's quite diverse economic conditions, and we look to take advantage of those conditions through actively managing our portfolio.
If you were just to pick up a headline in Australia, you'd tend to think that the outlook in Europe is not so positive. To what extent do you view that as being noise? I mean, what's your take on the broader region from an economic perspective? Yeah,
I think there are challenges there for the long term. So we mentioned the short-term issues. Long-term drivers of growth, demographics and productivity aren't really in Europe's favour at the moment. That's the challenge that policymakers have there today. So I think there are going to be challenges economically over the long term for growth to get back to trend levels. for infrastructure, that has an impact to an extent, but not all economic metrics impact our companies. Not all of our companies are impacted by economic demand, for example. So we look to invest in those companies which aren't impacted by negative developments, and take advantage of opportunities where we see fit.